Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about my January TBR, the books I'm planning to read as we start the new year. Now, this isn't going to be a massive, overly ambitious stack of 10 or 15 books that I'll immediately abandon halfway through the month. I like my TBRs to be realistic, and more importantly, I like them to reflect what I'm actually interested in reading right now. January for me right now is about settling back into long-term projects and continuing series I'm already invested in, and also starting new ones uh, a bit carefully rather than all at once. So this month's list is a mix of finishing, continuing, and beginning, which feels like a good way to set the tone for the new year. Now I have 5 books planned, all from series, but all serving very different purposes. Now I usually read about 4 books each month, and I have one extra if I manage to get it far. Otherwise it's getting pushed to February. The first book I want to talk about is The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is, of course, the final volume of The Lord of the Rings. And it's one I'm really looking forward to finishing. Not in a rush to the end way, but in a more reflective sense. I'm reading it as part of an online book club where we are reading the whole trilogy. And in January we are finishing this project. This reread has been much slower and more deliberate than when I first read Tolkien years ago. I've been paying more attention to the structure, the pacing and the tone rather than just the big moments everyone already knows. And I think The Return of the King really benefits from that kind of reading. What I'm especially curious about this time around is how the book balances its different endings. Tolkien doesn't just wrap things up neatly and stop. He takes his time, and I think that can feel strange if you're not in the right mindset for it. But now I actually appreciate that patience a lot more than I used to. This is also a book I like finishing early in the year. It feels like a sense of closure, not just for the story itself, but for the reread project that's been ongoing for a while now. And once it's done, I can let it sit for a bit before inevitably returning to Tolkien again in the future. Next up is The Drawing of the Free, the second book in Stephen King's Dark Tower series. Now this is one I'm genuinely excited about, because The Gunslinger, the first book, was such a strange experimental book. I liked it a lot, but it also felt more like a prologue than a fully formed novel. The Drawing of the Free is where I hope the series really starts to show what it wants to be. And from what I've heard from longtime fans, this is where the pacing picks up. The world expands and Roland, the main character, becomes a more rounded and more complicated character. It's also where the series starts pulling in elements that feel less like a weird western and more like the genre blending epic people always talk about. I'm also reading the Dark Tower series slowly and intentionally. This isn't a binge series for me. I want to sit with each book, give it space, and see how my reaction changes as the series develops. And so January feels like a good time to step back into this world and see how the second book reshapes my expectations. The first real new start on this TBR is Shards of Honor by Lewis McMaster Bujold, which is the beginning of the Vukosigan saga. This is a series I've been circling around for a long time now. I hear about it all the time, usually from people whose taste in science fiction I trust. But for one reason or another, I've always put it off. And January feels like the right moment to finally start it. What appeals to me most here is that this is character-driven science fiction. I'm expecting something more focused on people and politics and personal stakes rather than just big concepts or spectacle. And I think that's exactly what I want at the start of the year, when I'm easing into longer reading sessions again. I'm also deliberately keeping my expectations measured. I'm not going in expecting to fall in love immediately or to read half the series in one go. This is about seeing whether the tone and the writing and the world will work for me. And if they do, I know I've got a lot ahead of me. Next up is The Daughter of the Empire by Raymond E. Feist and Jenny Wirtz, the first book in the Empire trilogy. So far, I've only read the original Rift War Saga trilogy, and that's it. I haven't gone beyond that yet, so this will be my first time stepping outside that core storyline and into a different part of the world. And that's part of what makes this pick so appealing. It's familiar enough that I understand the setting and the wider conflict, but it's also completely new in terms of characters, culture and focus. From what I understand, this trilogy leans much more into politics, court intrigue and long-term consequences than the more adventure-driven Rift War books. And I'm especially interested to see how the collaboration with Jenny Wirtz changes the feel of the story, because this series often gets singled out as something very different, and in many cases stronger than the mainline Rift War novels. Despite his weak points in the Rift War trilogy, in my opinion, were the female characters and the romance. He seemed to also know this and asked Jenny Wirtz to help him out with writing a female main character. And so it's about expanding my understanding of the Rift War beyond the original trilogy and seeing whether this side of it resonates with me. And the final book on my January TBR is Mobilization by Yoshiki Tanaka, the fifth book of the Legend of the Galactic Heroes. This series has become one of my most consistent long-term reads. It's not something I rush through, and it's not something I read based on mood alone. It rewards attention, patience and continuity more than excitement. Mobilization is a point in the series where political tensions and strategic decisions really start to stack on top of each other. It's less about individual battles and more about systems, alliances and long-term consequences. And I like having one book like this on my TBR. Something that anchors my reading month and reminds me why I enjoy slow, thoughtful science fiction in the first place. That's my January TBR. 5 books, all from series, but all serving different purposes. Finishing a classic, continuing long-term projects, and cautiously starting something new. And I think this feels like a very good reflection of how I actually read. And it sets a tone I'm comfortable carrying through the rest of the year. And as always, I'll be talking about my progress and any changes in my weekly reading updates. Because no TBR is set in stone, even when you usually stick to it. If you like to let me know what you're reading in January, or if you've read any of these and have spoiler-free thoughts, feel free to leave a comment. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.